This is VK6ARN, Newswest. We are a community organisation and we've been serving up the best amateur radio news in Australia since 1931. Hi there and welcome to Newswest for the 20th of August 2023. Now to Ono, VK6FLAB, with another episode of Foundations of Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. There's nothing quite as satisfying as the click of a well-designed piece of equipment. It's something that tickles the brain, and done well, it makes the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. If time was on my side and I wasn't going somewhere else with this, I'd now regale you with research on the phenomenon. I'd explore the community of people building mechanical keyboards and those who restore equipment to their former glory. Instead, I'm encouraging you to dig whilst I talk about the second and third harmonics. This is about amateur radio after all. Over the years, there's been a steady stream of commentary around the quality of handheld radios. Some suggest that the cheaper the radio, the worse it is. Given that these kinds of radios are often the very first purchase for an aspiring amateur, it would be useful to have a go at exploring this. When a radio is designed, the aim is for it to transmit exactly where it's intended to, and only there. Any transmission that's not where you plan is considered a spurious emission. By carefully designing a circuit, by adding shielding, by filtering and other techniques, these spurious emissions can be reduced or eliminated. But this costs money, either in the design stage or in the cost of materials and manufacturing. It's logical to think that the cheaper the radio, the worse it is. But is it really true that a cheap radio has more spurious emissions than an expensive one? To give you an example of a spurious emission, consider an FM transmitter tuned to the 2-meter amateur band, let's say 146.5 MHz. If you key the radio and all is well, the radio will only transmit at that frequency. But that's not always the case. It turns out that if you were to listen on 293 MHz, you might discover that your radio is also transmitting there. If you're familiar with the amateur radio band plan, you'll know that 293 MHz is not allocated as an amateur frequency, so we're not allowed to transmit there. In fact, in Australia, that frequency is reserved for the Australian Department of Defence, and there's an additional exclusion for the Murchison Radio Astronomy Observatory. 293 MHz isn't a random frequency. It's twice 146.5 MHz, and it's called the second harmonic. There's more. If you multiply the base frequency by 3, you end up at 439.5 MHz, the third harmonic. In Australia, that frequency falls into the amateur allocation as a second use. Its primary use is again the Department of Defence. These two transmissions are examples of spurious emissions. To be clear, the transmitter is tuned to 146.5 MHz, and these unintended extra signals come out of the radio at the same time. This is bad for several reasons, legal and otherwise. The first, obvious one, is that you're transmitting out of band, which as an amateur you already have no excuse for, since getting your license requires you to understand that this is strictly not allowed. The International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, has specific requirements for what's permitted in the way of spurious emissions from an amateur station. Spurious emissions also mean that there is energy being wasted. Instead of the signal only coming out at the intended frequency, some of it is appearing elsewhere, making the 5 watts you paid for less effective than you hoped for. So, what's this got to do with the click I started with? Well, thanks to Randall, Victor Kilo 6 Whiskey Romeo, I have on loan a heavy box with a cathode ray tube or green CRT screen, lots of buttons and knobs, and the ability to measure such spurious emissions. It's marked HP8920A RF Communications Test Set. Using this equipment is very satisfying. You switch it on and a fan starts whirring. After a moment you hear a beep, then the screen announces itself, almost as if there's a PC in there somewhere. Turns out that there is, and the beep is the power-on self-test or post-beep. Originally released in 1992, this magic box can replace 22 instruments for transceiver testing. I started downloading user manuals. Oh boy, there's lots to learn. Bringing back lots of memories, it even has a programming language, Instrument Basic, to control it. Where have you been all my life? Turns out that in 1992 this piece of kit cost as much as my car. Anything for the hobby, right? At the next Hamfest I'll be using it to measure as many handhelds as I can get my hands on, and taking notes. I have no idea how many I'll be able to test, but I'm looking forward to putting some numbers against the repeated claims of quality and price. I can tell you that a couple of weeks ago I got together with Randall and Glyn, Victor Kilo 6 Papa Alpha Whiskey, and spent an enjoyable afternoon testing several radios, and there are some surprising results already. Perhaps this is something you might attempt at your next community event. Gather data rather than opinions. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Well, today's a bit of a funny day for hearing the news broadcast, because some of you'll be hearing it over your cornflakes, some on the way to Hamfest and some at home who aren't at Hamfest, and the rest of you listening in the evening. I'm Bob VK6POP, and I mentioned Hamfest because that's where I am this morning, mainly promoting Perth Tech and the Perth Tech raffle, but I will have a few bits and pieces for sale from a deceased estate. Our Perth Tech is shaping up to be a program full of useful and interesting talks on the Saturday, but Saturday isn't all of Perth Tech. Let me enthuse you. Firstly, I need to be clear, Perth Tech has several components and each stands alone, so you can choose to attend any or all of the various parts of Perth Tech. For some people, Perth Tech will commence on Friday afternoon with the arrival of those taking up the camping offer. Yes, camping. We have on-site parking for caravans, campers and swags. There's a fee for this option, and on Friday evening there'll be some sort of loosely organised activity, even if it's just a show and tell, and you should bring something for a communal barbecue. Saturday's the big day, wall-to-wall presentations of a technical nature of interest to radio amateurs. We're still firming up the program, but I can tell you it's looking good. We'll draw the Perth Tech main raffle on Saturday afternoon. There will also be a day raffle for a bit of fun. On Saturday evening, straight after the presentations, there's a sundowner. The bar will be open and you can buy your own drinks. On Sunday, we invite people to run workshops on a topic of their choice. They should be practical, skills-based workshops. Would you like to offer a workshop? Your choice of venue, your choice of topic. We'll just include it in Perth Tech and promote it for you. So, what next for you? The punter. First of all, mark the date in your diary. Set it aside so you won't miss out. Friday the 27th to Sunday the 29th of October, with the main show on Saturday. Buy raffle tickets. The Perth Tech raffle is what finances Perth Tech. The success of the raffle determines how much we can put into Perth Tech. Remember, Perth Tech is free to attend. We only charge for the catering. Register for Perth Tech. Registrations will open soon. We'll advertise that here on the news, on our website, Facebook, everything else. All you've got to do is look and find it. Consider putting your hand up to help, both before and on the day. Again, we'll have details at our vk6.net website, so we invite you to visit the vk6.net website regularly for updates, and there's lots of other good information there too that's useful to Western Australian amateurs at vk6.net.
Since 1931, Newswest has provided amateur radio news for Western Australia and beyond. This is VK6ARN.
Hi, I'm Steve, VK6SJ, with this week's episode of Did You Know? I thought this week we might have a quick look at ham and mainstream communication suppliers in WA, not just shops where you can buy stuff for your weekend projects, but also to highlight some high-class manufacturers based here in WA who support our hobbies in ways that not everyone appreciates. So who do we have in WA? Anyone who's been in the hobby for 30 plus years will remember the TET Mtron brand. It was synonymous with tri-band Yagis, amplifiers and great quality tuners and other things you needed in your shack. While many of these products are no longer made by Mtron, TET Mtron moved to WA from Victoria about 15 years ago, and after a brief stint in Perth, moved to the coastal fishing town of Dongra, where Mark, the owner of TET Mtron, still makes great quality antennas, antenna components, balons of all types and power ratings, and components such as coax connectors and lightning arresters. While most antenna manufacturers in Australia only sell assembled antennas, 10mtron will sell separately every component to build your own antennas, or you can buy a complete antenna in kit form that's proven very popular here in WA, as well as around the country. Mark appears in more hamfests around the country than any other ham supplier, bar none. Mark, along with the rest of the suppliers to our hobby in WA, donates heavily to most, if not all, clubs here with vouchers and products. Another manufacturer in Perth that gets less recognition than they deserve is Bushcom. Bushcom, as well as the ham-specific brand Horizon, make great products for both the ham and commercial HF sector. They make a great selection of wire antennas well suited for the lower bands that also work well in the high bands, and there are a lot of newer hams in Perth whose first antenna has come from Bushcom's factory in Bayswater. On top of that, though, they also make balins, mobile HF antennas, and also open to making the odd special as well. The face of Bushcom, Graham, is also often seen at ham events in WA, and also sells many of his products to DX Engineering in the US, one of the world's largest ham sales organisations. Here's some great boutique products such as magnetic loops and steerable dipoles for 40 metres. Might add he also donated a 80 and 40 metre antenna to Ham College, which has been very much appreciated. Who remembers the Turlin brand beginning who knows when? I'm only 57, so I don't remember them starting. They made the iconic Outbacker and Ham Outbacker mobile tap whips that were the go-to antenna before auto antenna tuners became a thing. This was also a WA brand that enjoyed global exposure and was based here in Perth. Terry, the owner, still makes the odd shipment of product for his most loyal customers, including major international ham brands. In the regional areas of WA, we also have some great businesses supporting the hobby. In Albany, there's the Leading Edge, who's a registered ICOM ham dealer and active ham, John, VK6KJ. And in Geraldton, there's also another emerging ICOM dealership run by Greg, VK6FG. In Perth, many of the mainstream communications businesses have also supported our hobby in less public ways. A friend of mine who's busily building interest in ham radio in the scouting movement tells me that Radlink repaired his long out-of-warranty repeater recently, and I keep hearing of Steve at Digital Radio Systems in Canning Vale donating all sorts of stuff to various ham groups, including a couple of solar batteries to WAG recently. In the past, Perth has had a very special place in the communications industry. One of two of the largest commercial HF manufacturers in the world, Barrett, is based in Perth and now owned by the largest radio manufacturer in the world. Who hasn't seen a KL or KX repeater in a repeater sites across the country? Many a ham in Perth has worked for the manufacturer dating back to the late 80s and has a soft spot for those radios. A similar radio, but much updated, is still manufactured here in Perth by Spectra Engineering, the owner of which is often seen at hamfests in Perth. I was presenting a design package to Los Angeles County for a data radio system about 10 years ago when Motorola presented their paging system using the MX800 from Spectra Engineering. I was representing a Sydney-based company at the time, but I couldn't help speaking up that it was a great Perth-made product. Other hams in Perth are not only working in iconic Perth comms companies in niche areas, but one Perth-based ham in particular has been central in bringing software-defined radios into the mainstream ham sector, Phil VK6APH, and has lectured on the subject all around the world. Another emerging business in our sector is Newswest. While they're predominantly an IT business, they are the technical muscle behind the Austravel commercial HF network, of which many hams are also a member of. Newswest also repairs ham rigs, and I think the only business doing that here. They do a very professional job of that, by the way. Some of you probably know that I also run a ham business. I don't want this to be a blatant self-serving plug, so I won't harp on long. The business is called DX Radio Systems and has a retail presence in Midland. We're the Australian distributor for Flex Radio and the largest ham ICOM dealer in WA. Google us and you'll find out more. For a city of 1.5 million, we are well and truly overrepresented in the communications industry in this country, in my opinion. Other iconic brands in the past that have manufactured radios and accessories include Wyoke Electronics, Allcom, Perth Communications, who made a small HF mobile radio in the 70s and 80s right here in Perth. So, support your local businesses in Perth who support your hobby. Look at who keeps turning up to all of the ham events or at least donating to them. the hobby would be poorer for their departure. Supporting them assists to make sure that they don't depart, and they're all great value anyway, so you aren't paying a premium to support them. Well, thanks for listening again. This has been Steve, VK6SJ, with another episode of Did You Know? If you'd like a text copy of this or other articles, they'll be posted to my blog page at dxradiosystems.com.au about 2 weeks after it's gone to air.
How did you go in the Remembrance Day contest? Before I go any further, I want to remind you to make sure that your log is in. Logs are submitted online to vklogchecker.com. Did you get that? vklogchecker, no spaces.com. If you've already submitted your log, it might pay to check that it's there, safe and sound. Now for the contest itself, let me tell you my tale. It's not one of woe, even though I could have done a lot better. Although I prefer doing contests portable from a bush campsite, this time I did it from my son's residence in Augusta. He's not a ham, so I had to take everything that I needed. The plan was to string up a long wire, a half-wave end-fed sort of a thing. I didn't organise myself to take a 9-to-1 so that was strike one. I had the materials along with some stuff I bought at the local hardware to make one, but didn't have the right tools to make successfully. I got halfway there and it was getting late, and I wanted to be ready to go on Saturday. So, change of plan. After pacing up and down the yard and measuring 2 lengths of cable that I had, I settled on building a trusty doublet. I hadn't packed any ladder line, so I had to settle for a 4-to-1 ballon at the feed point and a coax feed to the tuner. The doublet was set up in an inverted V configuration with the feed point only 6 metres above the ground, supported by a squid pole. The ends of the 2 legs of the wire, each 30 metres long, were tied off to the fence, just under 2 metres above ground. This antenna probably shouldn't have worked that well, but as I've noted previously, antennas don't read the rulebook. The antenna analyzer showed that none of the bands I'd be using showed any extraordinarily high or low impedances, and the auto-tuner had no difficulty matching them. The bonus was, however, the performance of the antenna. I was pleasantly surprised that I worked all states, and a few Kiwis, on that antenna, on 40, 20 and 80 metres. And on Sunday morning, I listened to the news broadcast from Phil on 160 metres, crystal clear, at S9 at 350 kilometres. Not bad. With everything working so well, how come I had a mediocre result? It was mostly because I was feeling unwell and I had a few breaks. And on Sunday morning, with all good intentions of resuming at my normal wake-up time of 4 a.m, I slept in till 6:30. I worked the station for a couple of hours, but it seemed that most people had packed up and gone home, and it didn't take long to start stumbling across the same people who we couldn't work again. The important things to take home from this are that any antenna is better than no antenna, and that you never know if you never have a go. I'm Bob, VK6POP.
This is Newswest from VK6ARN, produced by amateurs for amateurs, purely about the hobby of amateur communication and experimentation.
Good morning, listeners. This is Roy, VK6XV, with this week's helpline for the 20th of August 2023. So I have the following. I have a Hotel Tango 33 linear amplifier by Hallicrafters. It's $350. There's a Daiwa controller and rotator for $350 also. There's a vacuum tube voltmeter for $50. For those items, please contact Barry, VK6 Alpha Delta India, on mobile 0428 959 771, 0428 959 771, or email to bravo.juliet.bravo uniform romeo november sierra@bigpond.com. And Stephen Truscott still has a lot of radio accessories, cables, connectors, all still available from him. Stephen Truscott in Palmyra. His phone number 0401 804 166. I'll say again 0401 804 166, or the email is Sierra Tango Echo Papa Hotel Echo November Tango @westnet.com.au. And VK6KRC, did I say that? Yes. And he may still have an iMac SK510 jumbo socket, an iMac ceramic glass chimney, an iMac anode cooler, an iMac 1000 tube, all items $450. Contact Nora on 6363 5350. Telephone 63635350 or 043 835 2661. 043 835 2661. And that's me for this week. Thank you. Have a good day at the Hamfest, the Northern Corridors Radio Group Hamfest on today. See you there. Cheers. VK6XV73.
Hi there, I'm Clinton, VK6FCRC, and I'd like to thank our Newswest team of volunteers and broadcasters each week, and those regularly submitting content each week. I'd also like to thank our readers and you for listening. Please stand by now for callbacks after the ident, or if nobody is taking callbacks, please fill out the form on the VK6.net website so we know how many people are listening or reading Newswest each week.